my experience of actually finding the poems that went in this anthology, The Path to Kindness, is that they really encourage me to think about and look for those moments in my own life. And so it's one of the reasons I'm so excited to do readings like this when we can, whether on person or online, because I feel like we just need more of those reminders that kindness is still alive, if not always well in the world. It is still alive in the world, and we can do our best to feed it. So I'll just share a few poems of my own from the book, and then a couple poems by others, and then we'll get to our other featured readers tonight. So the first poem that I want to share is called Self-Compassion. And this poem is actually, it mentions a meditation teacher who is from the Twin Cities, who teaches at Common Ground Meditation Center, where I actually learned how to meditate. And so this is, I think of this as my Minneapolis poem in many ways. So this is Self-Compassion. My friend and I snickered the first time we heard the meditation teacher, a grown man, call himself honey with a hand placed over his heart to illustrate how we too might become more gentle with ourselves and our runaway minds. It's been years since we sat with legs twisted on cushions, holding back our laughter. But today I found myself crouched on the floor again, not meditating exactly, just agreeing to be still. Saying honey to myself each time I thought about my husband splayed on the couch with aching joints and fever from a tick bite. What if he never gets better? Or considered the threat of more wildfires, the possible collapse of the Gulf Stream, then remembered that in a few more minutes I'd have to climb down to the cellar and empty the bucket I placed beneath a leaky pipe that can't be fixed until next week. How long do any of us really have before the body begins to break down and empty its mysteries into the air? Oh, honey, I said, for once, without a trace of irony or blush of shame, the touch of my own hand on my chest, like that of a stranger, oddly comforting in spite of the facts. And I have to say, I think I cribbed that last line a little bit from the great farmer poet Wendell Berry, who said, "Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts." A little bit of an echo of that. So the next poem I'd like to share is called The Pool, and this one is about my late father. He's been gone for about 20 years, but part of my writing practice has been just allowing these memories to bubble up and really kind of reevaluating our relationship. I think after someone's been gone for a long time, you realize that your relationship was actually different than you viewed it at the time, or you can realize that. In this case, I was looking back at a sacrifice that he made that I didn't really realize was a loving gesture at the time. So this is called The Pool. Because he couldn't afford the kidney-shaped in-ground pool we all wanted, my father went out and bought a used galvanized pool whose rusted rim I refused to touch. As usual, he had a solution. He split a length of black rubber hose down the middle with his pocket knife, then stretched it over the rough sides inch by inch until no rust showed. Back then, I never thought such gestures were selfless, evidence of what we call unconditional love. But now I feel my small hands gripping soft rubber, and I see my father on the back porch, cigarette dangling from his smiling lips as he watches me lift myself out of the pool, flinging cold water from my goose-pimpled skin as if I'd been reborn again. I still think about that pool all the time. And the next poem I'd like to share, this one is also about parental sacrifice and kind of looking back and realizing what those who love us actually did for us. I mean, I know not all of us have that experience, but it feels very universal, because probably even if we didn't have that growing up, we've made some of those sacrifices for people we love. And so this one is The Raincoat by Eda Limon. When the doctor suggested surgery and a brace for all my youngest years, my parents scrambled to take me to massage therapy, deep tissue work, osteopathy, and soon my crooked spine unspooled a bit. I could breathe again and move more in a body unclouded by pain. My mom would tell me to sing songs to her the whole 45-minute drive to Middle 2 Rock Road and 45 minutes back from physical therapy. She'd say even my voice sounded unfettered by my spine afterward. So I sang and sang because I thought she liked it. I never asked her what she gave up to drive me, or how her day was before this chore. Today, at her age, I was driving myself home from yet another spine appointment, singing along to some maudlin but solid song on the radio, and I saw a mom take her raincoat off and give it to her young daughter when a storm took over the afternoon. My God, I thought, my whole life I've been under her raincoat, thinking it was somehow a marvel that I never got wet. So a little Mother's Day poem for you all. This next poem, I wasn't planning on reading this one, but I really love this poem, and I think of it as being about, you know how you're out in the world and you see someone and you have this connection. You don't even need to talk to them, but you just feel something, even though it's a stranger. And so this poem by Christine Kitano captures that feeling really well. This is called For the Korean Grandmother on Sunset Boulevard. So here you are. Night comes as it does elsewhere. Light pulls slowly away from telephone posts. Shadows of buildings darken the pavement like something spilled. Even the broken moon seems to turn its face. And again you find yourself on this dark riverbed, this asphalt miracle, holding your end of a rope that goes slack when you tug it. Such grief you bear alone. But wait, just now a light approaches. Its rich band draws you forward, out of shadow. It is here, the bus that will ferry you home. Go ahead, grandmother, go on. I also, just as a poet, love that description of the rich band of light that is a bus at night. You know, there's just something particular about that. And now Christine has described it for all of us, so we don't need to worry about that. And then I'll share just one more poem. And this is a poem about still feeling the connection with a family member, even though there have been other deep divisions. And I feel like this poem speaks to so much of our own experience with people out in the world right now and the various divisions that we might have. So this is by Rebecca Faust, and it's Kinship of Flesh. I swung my legs up to the table, as I always like to do, and saw another pair swing up, identical gesture, length, and curve. I saw your taper finger, not vein, walnut knuckle, just like Mom's, and mine, somehow knitting together years, miles, dollars, cultures of division. Visits, letters, calls, emails dwindled until it seemed we had less in common than people I met in line at the post office. Then you sat down next to me, sister, and I saw what I had forgotten. So thanks so much for listening. Our next reader is going to be Margaret Hasse. Did I get that right? Yes, I have said it wrong when we were at a reading before, and Margaret was so kind about it, so thank you. So our next reader is Margaret Hasse, and I was going to say she's one of my favorite poets, but all of our poets here are one of my favorite poets. She lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she's been active as a teaching poet, among other work in the community. 6 of Margaret's full-length poetry collections are now in print. During the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, Margaret collaborated with artist Sharon DeMark on Shelter, a collection of poems and paintings about refuge. Beautiful, beautiful collection. And a chapbook, The Call of Glacier Park, is her latest publication, which will be out in June. Her newest book, this is not in the bio, but her newest book is Summoned, which I highly recommend as well. So please welcome Margaret Hasse.
James, and James has come so far, you know. The rest of us come just from maybe 30 miles away or 10 miles away, but James is from Vermont and visiting here to celebrate this new book with us, which is so exciting. We're all so pleased to be part of the book, to be selected to be in it. He edited it. He sought the poems that he liked and edited it and pulled it together. And one really special part of an aspect of this book that I especially like is that he, every once in a while in the book, asks us to stop and reflect on a poem that we just read, and he gives some suggestions about thinking about that poem or how we could write about it or use it as a meditation. And I think that's a very unusual and special part of the book. Another special part is that and I think James referred to this a bit, is that it's about connections of various sorts, the connections that we have with the natural world. A lot of the poems really shine with that wonderful joy and connective tissue that we have with the world. And with family, a number of the poems are about family relationships. And some are about strangers, and some are about memories, and some are about those times where you are maybe broken or in despair, but suddenly something happens and you are just changed by it, that band of light that you might see. On my way over, my husband and I drove along Lake Street from St. Paul, and in that graveyard, that cemetery there that's called the Pioneers and Soldiers, I looked over to the right in the most glossy grass I've seen in a long time, and there were 2 small deer grazing in there on the gravestones. I didn't know about that, and it made me think of those Indian ponies that James writes about coming out to, in their kindness, to be with James Wright and the friend he was walking with. I had not known that. Many of you are shaking your heads that you did know about those deer. I have, and I appreciated that James chose a poem of mine that is about work, the ordinary work of in a family, and that he, and that some of the other poems are about that kind of Zen-like moment when you realize this too is a beautiful thing to be doing, such a simple thing such as this poem is. It's very short and it's called Clothing. Clothes press against the glass window of a washing machine like faces in the rain. After they're spun in the big dryer, I fold my baby's plush onesies, my son's favorite jeans, and t-shirts my husband taught me to roll like window shades when it's my turn to do the laundry. I stack up the items, then hug everything to my chest, smelling warm, clean cotton that covers the ones I love. There are seveul poems in here about just some basic zen-like household activity, and I appreciated having that because sometimes we feel it's drudgery. The poem that I chose to read from the book that I was drawn to today, and I'm drawn to different ones on different days, but I felt like I really needed this poem today, is one on page 162 called, it's not my poem, it's by Brad Aaron Maudlin. Do you think I said that right? Do you know him? Yeah. What you missed that day you were absent from 4th grade. And there are a number of poems here about the connections we have with children, babies, our own children, but also just young life, and there's some schooling poems too, which I really appreciated. So what you missed that day you were absent from 4th grade. Oh, and I chose it also because my husband until retirement was a 4th grade teacher. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's name. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you had forgotten to do something else, something important, and how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy, the one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost and one person add up to something. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had that for 4th grade teaching along with all of the other things? This book has joined another book that I use in kind of morning reading and meditations that was given to me by a dear friend of mine who's here today, called The Art of Forgiveness, Loving Kindness, and Peace by Jack Cornfield. And I'm glad you read the poem, James, about self-care, because that's a type of loving kindness and how we nurture peace. I looked in my other books of poetry to find a couple of poems that had to do with kindness. And this is from a book of mine called Earth's Appetite. And on the cover it has the Paul Klee painting, A Guardian Angel Serves a Little Breakfast, which seems to me to be an image for kindness. But this is a poem story, a story poem. I suppose we'd call it more of a prose poem, and it's called And All Points West. Her silk blouse sticks to the plastic chair. She's going away from home and never coming back, the same girl. She's bunched like leaf lettuce between two large men whose hairy forearms lie on armrests to the left, to the right. A gray transfer station in Utah. The sign on her new bus will say, Reno, Nevada, and the announcer will add, and all points west. Already she has given away some money to a woman who said she had no money. Cigarette smoke drifts through the air. In a washroom in Omaha, Nebraska, she removed the ribbon with her boyfriend's ring strung around her neck like a cowbell, stuffed it into her purse. As graduation gifts, she has a new watch and a new suitcase with an alarm clock, wallet, shoes, clothes she sewed for 4-H, underwear from a store in Sioux City, and a novel that all freshmen in college are to read, Man-Child in the Promised Land. She stands to stretch, a soft clatter. On the floor, her Timex, One of the men scoops up the metal and its unbroken face like a handful of dice, turns to the girl who lifts her wrist as if he will check the pulse in the runnel of her veins. As his big paws fasten the buckle, he says, "I do this for the wife." He fumbles with the second clasp on a safety chain. All her life, she will remember the stranger, think that he blessed her, opening one delicate gold loop and linking it to another. Sort of one of those Blanche Dubois lines about the kindness of strangers, right? And one last poem before I turn it to the next reader. And this is from the book that James referred to called Shelter, a little book that got me through COVID, and my friend as well, who's the watercolor artist on the cover, where we combined our energies and wrote about various things that sheltered us, people, animals, and that sheltered us during COVID, including things that we didn't get very often, like hugs, kind of a shelter. So this is a kindness of a grand sort, the people who make huge commitments in their lives to great kindnesses to others, the way so many people are doing for the Ukrainian people right now. Sanctuary Church. We came here in the rain. I brought my doll. The room is little and clean. Sometimes there is singing of many people in the walls. Shh. Mama touches lips. Shh. Mama touches fingers to my lips. It's secret how we got to this place. We used to live by grandmother. My school had a red door. We slept on the floor when guns shot. The coo of pigeons came in the light. We hide because we have no papers. The women with food bring papers for me to draw on and crayons bright as gold. My mother says that the women have hearts of gold I cannot see. Someday we will leave for a house with no fear. It will be good, like eating when you are hungry. And this is how we live, and this is how we live. Maybe I should have said at the beginning of that it's in voice, but you could catch on pretty early, right, that it's a girl. So I get to introduce our third reader, Michael Claver Diggs, the author of Worldly Things, which was awarded the 2020 Max Ritvo Poetry Prize. He was born and raised in Kansas and now lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. His work has appeared in Lit Hub, The Rumpus, Rain Taxi, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Waterstone Review, Midway Review, and North Dakota Quarterly, many places. He teaches poetry and creative nonfiction through the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop. And I want to say that I happily, between James Cruz, who blurbed my most recent book, and Michael Claver Diggs, who also blurbed my most recent books, I'm so grateful to these two men. And sad to tell you that Michael Claver Diggs has had COVID recently, and he has one more day of quarantine, so he could not be here, but we have him and his poem here through his voice. And you're about to hear the poem that's in the book through a recording that he made this morning for you, because he was very sad to not be able to be here. He even played around with the idea that he'd kind of hide back here, but he said we better not do that. So, David, are we ready to introduce Michael Claver Diggs?
Yep.
Thanks.
Hello from Michael Claver Diggs. Very sorry I cannot be there with you all tonight. James, a real honor to be part of this anthology. Congratulations on The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy, and all the important work that you're doing to bring kindness and joy and community forward through the arts. Connie, Margaret, Joyce, it hurts my heart not to be able to read with all of you and with James tonight. Margaret, thank you so much for inviting me to share a recording. I'm going to try to read 2 poems quickly and keep the file size down. The first one is in the anthology. It's Coniferous Fathers. Let's fashion gentle fathers, expressive, holding us how we wanted to be held before we could ask, singing off-key lullabies written for us songs every evening like possibilities. Fathers who say, this is how you hold a baby, but never mention a football. Say nothing in that moment. Just bring us to their chests naturally, without shyness. Let's grow fathers from pine, not oak. Coniferous fathers, raising us in their shade. Fathers soft enough to bend. Fathers who love us like their fathers couldn't. Fathers who can talk about menstruation while playing a game of pepper in the front yard. No. Take baseball out. Let's discover a new sort. Fathers as varied and vast as a superior forest. Let's kill off sternness and play down wisdom. Give us fathers of laughter and fathers who cry. Fathers who say, check this out. I'm scared. I'm sorry. Or, I don't know. Give us fathers strong enough to admit they want to be near us. They've always wanted to be near us. Give us fathers desperate for something different, not Johnny Appleseed, not even Atticus Finch. No more Rolling Stones. No more lazy boy dads reading newspapers in some other room. Let's create folklore side by side in a garden, singing songs about abiding. Just that. Abiding. Being steadfast. Present. Evergreen and ethereal. Let's make the old needles soft enough for us to rest on, dream on, next to them. Many of my poems are about empathy and community, being more understanding of each other so that we can be together and do great things together. And I love that I see so much of that in James's mission too, and in the anthologies that he's bringing forward, and in the way that he collects poems that are elevating those same opportunities for us as people. I want to sneak in one more poem if it's not too selfish. This one is called The Grove. Planted here as we are, see how we want to bow and sway with the motion of earth and sky. Feel how desire vibrates within us as our branches fan out. Promise entanglements, rarely touch. Hear our sweet rustlings. If only we could know how twisted up our roots are, we might make vast shelter together. Cooler places, verdant spaces, more sustaining air. But we are strange trees, reluctant in this forest. We oak and ash, we pine, the same, not different. All of us reach toward star and cloud. All of us want our share of light, just enough rainfall. Thank you so much for including me. Good wishes to everyone. I hope to see you all soon. Good night.
So we had Michael, but he wasn't adept enough to be able to introduce Joyce from afar, so I'll go ahead and do that. Joyce Sutphin grew up on a small farm in Stearns County, Minnesota. Her first collection of poems, Straight Out of View, won the Barnard New Women Poets Prize. Her recent books are The Greenhouse, From Salmon Poetry, and Carrying Water to the Field, New and Selected Poems from the University of Nebraska Press, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. She is the former Minnesota Poet Laureate and Professor Emerita of Literature and Creative Writing at Gustavus Adolphus College. Please welcome Joyce Sutphin.
Well, good would forget something tonight, but I forgot two things. My cell phone, that's good that I forgot not to have that. But my reading glasses, not so good. I know where they are, so I will. Shelley, my cousin, thank you. I bet they'll be just perfect. Okay. So I think I'm going to mostly read poems from the book. I'll read mine first. I love that you picked this one, Carrying Water to the Field, which is something we got to do as little kids. And I guess I was so thrilled to do it that it was more of a kindness to me than it was to my dad, but definitely, he was happy to see us come traipsing along, as he might have said. So I'll just read it before I paraphrase it. Carrying water to the field. And on those hot afternoons in July, when my father was out on the tractor cultivating rows of corn, my mother would send us out with a mason jar filled with ice and water, a dish towel wrapped around it for insulation. Like a rocket launched to an orbiting planet, we would cut across the fields in a trajectory calculated to intercept or perhaps even surprise him in his absorption with the row and the turning always over earth beneath the blade. He would look up and see us, throttle down, stop, step from the tractor with the grace of a cowboy dismounting his horse, and receive gratefully the jar of water, ice cubes now melted into tiny shards. Drinking it down with a single gulp while we watched. Mission accomplished. So I immediately started reading without Shelley's glasses, and you can bet in the part where I say that see, I can't even see it to read it, in a trajectory calculated to intercept or even perhaps surprise him. I should memorize my poems, but it's so much more fun to memorize other people's poems. you know. So I think I'm going to just read kind of a bunch of them. I don't have too much to say in between. There's so many, and some new poets to me. Heather Swan wrote this little, very skinny little poem that is huge on lightness. Lightness being just the ability to move without squishing something around you. And she says, outside my window, a wren alights on a fiddlehead fern, and the plant is forced to bend down its green spine. As he rests there, the air never leaves the bird's body, the way he floats through trees, and then he takes to the sky again, and the fern sways upright again to the sun. If only it could always be like this, the burden of one never breaking another. The burden burden of one never breaking another. That, you know, who's ever said that before? I don't think I've ever heard that, just said that way. If you could move through things without impacting in a bad way the rest of the creatures around you, that would be heaven, I think. I'd also like to read another little tiny one called Forsythia, and I'm reading this for Walt, who just put 2 Forsythias in today. Do you know what Forsythias look like? They're yellow. I always associate them with the New Jersey Turnpike because they fill in their all bright and cheerful first thing. Forsythia. I've got to get relaxed a little bit up here. You don't look formidable, but my body is acting as if that were true. Forsythia. What must it feel like after months of existing as bare brown sticks, all reasonable hope of blossoming lost, to suddenly one warm April morning burst into wild yellow song, hundreds of tiny prayer flags rippling in the still cold wind, the only flash of color in the dull yard, these small scraps of light, something we might hold on to. Sweet little one. I think I will skip the rather long one by Jane Hirschfield, I Would Like, but that is a beautiful poem. Check that one out. And I've always loved William Stafford's poem, You Reading This, Be Ready. It's right next to a Connie Wanek poem, which I'd love to read, but I think she might do that for herself. So, William Stafford's You Reading This, Be Ready. Starting here, what do you want to remember? How sunlight creeps along a shining floor? What scent of old wood hovers? What softened sound from outside fills the air? Will you ever bring a better gift for the world than breathing respect that you carry wherever you go right now? Are you waiting for time to show you some better thoughts? When you turn around, starting here, lift this new glimpse that you found. Carry into evening all that you want to keep from this day. The interval you spent reading or hearing this, keep it for life. What can anyone give you greater than now, starting here, right in this room, when you turn around? That is something I should consider as I'm feeling, a little dry and thirsty, and I'm thinking I'm maybe not reading as well as I really could. It's right now, this moment. This is it. This is where we are right now. Okay, I'm taking that to heart. And I'm looking that things are just arranging themselves so beautifully and kindly that I would like to read two more poems. One by Dorian Laux, I think is the way that is the correct way to pronounce it, but it's Laux, and that looks like you should say lo, you know, French kind of way, Laux, but it's Laux, I believe. And I think this is the first poem I read of hers, and it was the same year that the Oklahoma bombing happened, 1995 or so. Does that sound about right? And Dorian was visiting Gustavus, and we all went to Whiskey River, is what the restaurant was called, and we started hearing about what was happening, and I just remember her reading that night and just talking about it, and everyone was. It was the beginning of many shocks in the end of the 20th century and the beginning of this one. It's a very quiet poem called On the Back Porch. The cat calls for her dinner. On the back porch, I bend and pour brown soy stars into her bowl, stroke her dark fur. It's not quite night. Pinpricks of light in the eastern sky above my neighbor's roof, a transparent moon, a pink rag of cloud. Inside my house are those who love me. My daughter, Dust Biscuit Joe, and there's a man who will lift my hair in his hands, brush it until it throws sparks. Everything is just as I left it. Dinner simmers on the stove. Glass bowls wait to be filled with gold broth, sprigs of parsley on the cutting board. I want to smell this rich soup. The air around me growing dark as stars press their simple shapes into the sky. I want to stay on the back porch while the world tilts towards sleep until what I love misses me and calls me in. It's that last line. Is that a water?
Yeah.
Oh my. I was thinking, remember those cartoons, water, the person crawling across, I'm so thankful for the kindness of water. I think I will write an ode to water tonight. It really makes a difference, not usually this much, but a lot. I can read one poem with a tongue that moves. Yay, that's great. Where did it go? And it's big, so I don't need the glasses. Well, which one should I read? I'm going to read The Cup, which was written after what it describes. It just was taken down from time and place, and I had just had tea in Red Wing, Minnesota. The Cup. Yesterday, in the cafe, how beautiful the cup that held your tea, the yellow tea in the clear glass, and the flowers in the shimmering pouch. And how well you told the stories that fit into the hour, which lasted exactly as long as a cup of tea. In the clear blue tint of the glass, and how comfortable I thought I always feel with you, even in the rain, which you promised would come. I'm remembering the cup, the beautiful cup in the yellow cafe. So, I would like to introduce Connie Wanek. Connie was born in Wisconsin and raised in New Mexico and lived for over a quarter of a century in Duluth, Minnesota. She's the author of Bonfire, New Rivers Press, winner of the New Voices Award. That first book was the winner of the New Voices Award. Hartley Field, Holy Cow Press, and On Speaking Terms, Copper Canyon Press. In 2016, the University of Nebraska published Wonick's Rival Gardens New and Selected Poems as part of their Ted Kooser Contemporary Poetry Series. It's a beautiful, beautiful book, and it's great to have Connie here.
Here you go, Joyce.
Oh, that too. See, today's one of those days I forget my head at the
Okay. Thanks so much for including a poem in this book of mine, James. Thank you. And I love the anthology. It's just so optimistic and appreciative of what we should pay more attention to, and we don't really all the time. But I think that a book like this offers us such a variety and such, like poetry does. It's a whole universe on one page so often, and if you take it the way I do, then you try to not read too much at any one time and just give each poem what it deserves. I don't use a book like this and go read 10 poems. I like to give each one some space, because I know what it takes to write a poem. It's not that easy. I'm going to start out with a poem by Paula Gordon Lepp. It's called Gas Station Communion. That word communion, sort of Catholic sort of a word, but it was a little thing, really, this offer to fill my tire. I was unscrewing the valve cap and heard a voice behind me. Here, I'll get that for you. Oh, that's okay, I've got it, is what I normally say to such overtures. This knee-jerk reaction to refuse. I am the one who offers to help. I am the one who serves. Perhaps it was the eager spirit in his face or his brown eyes full of hopeful connection that caused me to say, okay. I felt the vibration of his unspoken benediction. I can't do much for you, fellow weary traveler, but I can do this. Lay down your burden, and I will carry it for a bit. And I couldn't help but wonder how many times I have denied someone the blessing of serving because I've been too stubborn to accept their gift. As I was standing there in the sun-drenched gas station parking lot, the hiss and tick of the air pump sounded very much like a psalm. I watched his hands filling more than just my tire with air, while goodness and grace swirled around us. I think that, I'm very guilty of this sort of thing. I'm very independent, and I don't let people do things for me, and I don't want them to do things. And
And I think a lot of that comes from early feminist, behavior and the thing like, I can do it myself, and I refuse to, be that helpless little lady, So, but I think that it's very true that the pleasure that I get from helping is one that I shouldn't deny others. And it's really only in my old age that I've begun to reform that stubborn desire to do it myself and to accept help. And I think, and so you're not too old to learn. This is the poem that James so kindly included. It's called Come In, and it's for Marcia, my next door neighbor, who's a master gardener and a lovely person, and you don't want to get on the wrong side of her either. She's not a fool, she sees right through you, and her approbation is worth something. Come in. It was the neighbor at the back door with a Vidalia onion in each hand, straight from the 10-pound sack the Shriners were selling, or the Rotarians, or Odd Fellows, or one of those antique civic organizations of great uncles atoning for their sins on a just-in-time basis. Come in. Come in. And she did, smiling. The 15 months of COVID had given those simple words a radical new meaning, an assertiveness. I felt I was tearing up a contract I never wanted to sign. Membership in an HOA, maybe. Pale yellow onions, too clean to have come from the soil, surely. Too sweet to make you cry. So I have a couple of other poems that are sort of newish. This one is, I wrote a little book of Mrs. God poems, which are all obviously about Mrs. God, and this one came too late to be in the book, and it's called Beauty. Once, only once, Mrs. God asked, "Am I beautiful?" Even God knew such a question had a single answer, however incomplete. She knew she wasn't supposed to want anything strictly for herself. She knew what was lovely was often time and temperature sensitive, like apricots, like spring peepers. And those who labored hardest in the fields were commonly fairest to the eye. But why? When Mrs. God looked into the mirror, all she saw was light. And this one is called An Anniversary for my husband of a lot of years. Through the first open window of May came an air of indecision, cool, then warm, like water in a wild lake fed by springs. This summer we will finally live as we were meant to, more simply, turning sunlight directly into white wine. Year after year, the same impossible promise. But haven't we been happy anyway? I say yes, and you say no, which means we're in perfect balance, if not harmony. Our ink neither red nor black, but invisible, unless the paper is held carefully to the flame. And there they are again, our marriage vows. Here's one. Can I read two more? Is that all right? All right. Here's one called Free Pens. This one's from my mom. My mother knew the value of free pens. She kept them in cups and drawers, and her motto, one of her mottos, was, "Why would you ever spend a penny on a pen?" Long after they dried up, she kept their little bodies, because each reminded her of an event, perhaps the home show, 1981 El Paso, or the time she considered assisted living. The salesman gave away expensive blue pens, so nice she stole the second one for me during Dad's last years. Besides, sometimes if you shake a dead pen hard enough, it starts to write again. And this one's called Mulberries in the Park. And this is really written by observing a young woman in Dowling Gardens, which some of you I'm sure know about. At the back of the gardens, between the gardens and the school, the grade school, Dowling Elementary, is a kind of a forest, patch of forest in the city, and there are fruit trees and there are mulberry trees, big mulberry trees, and so this is called Mulberries in the Park. At Free, they're cheap and sweet enough, and by late July, the tree's glad to shed them. Out there under the storm clouds, a young woman reaches into the plunging branches with long brown arms. She's bridling the great green horse in the summer pasture. She pulls a heavy bough closer and feels it lift her off her feet. She brought a dented pail, but eats as she picks, and around her falls a shower of mulberries from the treetop filled with starlings. Weighted with fruit, the whole tree staggers. Then the first raindrops tick among the leaves. Hurry now.